Hello everybody. It's quite interesting because there's like a group at the front and then there's empty chairs and then there's another group at the back. Can you hear me okay at the back? Cool. David introduced the board and I thought I might just quickly, and I haven't told them this so they're going to hate this, introduce the senior executive team of Ryman who are here apart from Debbie. So, and they're not going to be able to talk because one of our members, Tom, has completely lost his voice. So, but we'll start with Tom. Tom, do you want to just stand up? Tom is our Chief Construction Officer. He's worked for us for about 13 years now, haven't you, Tom? And all of the wonderful buildings that you see around the country, Tom and his team have done a great job of building those. So well done, Tom. And then we have Andrew Mitchell, who is our Chief Development Officer. So, Andrew and his team, they find our sites and they then go through the consenting process with councils and working with our operations teams to make sure that sort of villages that we're building meet the needs of our residents and our staff. So Andrew's done a great job this year. And like all good property developers, if you see him out doing the job, he's often got sunglasses on the top of his head. That's usually a sign that he's feeling confident. And Nicole Forster, who is our Chief People and Technology Officer. So Nicole looks after HR and technology, which is quite an unusual combination in a company. Most of the time they're separated. The reason why we do that is that what we find is so many technology things ultimately are only successful if people use them well. So that's why we combine the two. So well done, Nicole. And then we have Barbara Rain-and-Rose, who is our Chief Operations Officer. Barb has worked for Ryman for 25 years, so that's probably worth a round of applause on its own, isn't it? And Barb heads up all of the operations for the company, which means basically all of our 32 villages, how they're run, the property management of them, the care staff management, the training of nurses, the implementation of systems, the clinical quality, you name it. So it's a very wide scope role. And it requires having a mobile phone beside your bed 24/7 and along with her other people, senior people that work with her. So it's a very big job in terms of responsibility, caring for a lot of vulnerable people. So we should just acknowledge that work. Thank you, Barb. And of course, Debbie, she'll be watching down the webcast. She's worked for us for 27 years. She's our Chief Sales and Marketing Officer. Has just been an incredible icon, like Barb has been for Ryman, has seen us grow from a very small company to what we are today. I think that there'd be very few people in Australasia or even globally who understand the retirement living needs of older people, and the way that she sort of trains and mentors her team is wonderful. So we should just acknowledge Debbie's work as well. And the other person in the team is Dave Bennett. He's our Chief Financial Officer. Dave has done a fantastic job stepping into that role. He's far better than the last CFO, in my opinion. And he's really well respected by the senior executive team, provides each of them with great financial advice and input, has a really well functioning team that works for him. They were largely responsible for putting together that new annual report, which I can tell you was a lot of work. And just never puts a foot wrong. So well on, Dave. Rightio. So David's mention of Kevin is a reminder that the legacy we have means that we've got pretty big shoes to fill here at Ryman. When you've got someone like Kevin who founded the company 34 years ago and has left such an amazing culture, and it's our job as a team to maintain that culture forever. I've really loved my first 12 months on the job. There's been no shortages of challenges, but it was pretty satisfying when we did turn in a reasonably good result when we reported in May. The highlight for me, though, definitely is the visits I have around the country, visiting our villages and our construction sites. Oh, what have I done here? I've lost the slide. Yeah. Kevin was a firm believer in management by walking the floor, and that's what I've been doing. It's really humbling to visit our villages and to meet the people that make such a massive difference to the lives of 10,800 residents we've got around the country. When I speak to our staff and I ask them, you know, what really does it for you in terms of working for us, and almost all the time I get an answer from different parts of the country that it's all about the residents, or we just love looking after the residents, and that's just the natural, instinctual answer from our staff. And you can see the huge amount of commitment and effort that people put in to do that. The other thing that happens is that often when I leave a village, people that have sort of seen me around during the day, and I try and sort of go a bit like undercover boss. The only person who knows I'm coming is the village manager, so I don't make too big a deal of it. Is that people will often wait at reception so they don't miss me leaving, because they are desperate to tell me about the commitment of some of the staff that have personally affected them. And it's pretty humbling actually when you hear those sort of stories. So in a nutshell, that's what makes our villages tick. And it's just the same for the construction team. So I was reading our Yammer, which is our social media internally at Ryman, the other day, and a chap called Matt Hutchinson, who's a very senior construction manager with us, he posted a picture. It was a really beautiful picture at Devonport of the sun coming up in the morning and sort of seeing the kind of views that our residents will see. And there's a shot of Devonport there. And interestingly, he didn't sort of talk about the crane in the background, because sometimes we do get posts on cranes and this is how good this crane is, and it's actually better than the one at the other site. But on this occasion, he said, "Isn't it amazing to think that our residents will wake up to this view in about a year's time?" And that's all he said. And you think to yourself, that is why our construction team gets so fired up to do such a good job for people, because it's not just about building, it's about the fact that our construction team and Tom's team, they're very connected to the fact they're building communities for people. And I think that's what makes our construction operation really different, is that people can see that that they're part of a team that is building something that they don't just walk away from, that it's part of the DNA of the company. So when I look forward, I don't actually think that our growth will be constrained by either access to land or capital. Now, both those two things always represent a strong day-to-day challenge, but I believe that we'll always be able to find good sites. Andrew and the development team are great at what they do, how they do that, but they do, of course, tell me it's nearly impossible for the last 12 years, very difficult. But they're always able to do it. I actually think that the biggest constraint for our growth will be people, because we're a people business and we're big on culture. We're big on the fact that working for Ryman means something very different to working for anyone else. So getting the right people on board will always be our biggest challenge. And keeping people safe is our number one priority. And we had our first fatality in our history when we lost a young man, Graham Rabbits, on one of our construction sites in January this year. I've got 2 children, and I can only begin to imagine what Graham's family have gone through and continue to go through. I've promised them that his death will not be in vain, and I'm in regular contact with Graham's family, particularly Graham's father, Selwyn. So despite the best efforts in the past and the things that we try and get right, when something like this happens, you do have to take a good hard look at everything that you do. And believe me, an event like this makes you seriously determined just to do better. As David mentioned, we've reset the pay of our staff, and in particular the 517 nurses that work for us. We've also invested heavily in people development, and 288 of our leaders have taken part in the new LEAP development program, which we have put in place for the first time in the last 12 months. We've also sent a number of senior leaders to the London School of Economics to study leadership, and 50 senior leaders are also receiving individualised leadership coaching from external specialists as well. David has run through the headline numbers, but I wanted to now take you through some highlights of the year and then our expansion plans so you can see the level of momentum that we've built up. We ended the year with less than 1% of the portfolio available for resale, and occupancy in our care centres was 97%. Now you can compare that to an industry average of about 89%. In fact, right now it's about 88%. We made great progress in raising the standard of our care even higher. And we achieved a milestone actually a couple of weeks ago. We now have 20 of our New Zealand villages have 4-year certification from the Ministry of Health, which really is the gold standard in care. We've also recorded our best ever survey results across residents, their families and our staff. And so when your residents and staff are happier than ever, that's great, but we also get lots of good feedback during those surveys, and so we know exactly what we need to do to also improve, which is so important. At last year's AGM, I mentioned that we were just about to start the rollout of Ryman Care. Now, at that point in time, we had a lot ahead of us to achieve that, and it's worthy of celebration. I know Barb's really pleased about it, and her team, and also Nicole's technology team, is that we've just celebrated the successful completion of the rollout of Ryman in New Zealand. So I think that's worthy of a round of applause. There's this great quote from Thomas Edison, you might have heard it. Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And we've been perspiring in the last 12 months quite a lot. And it's gone incredibly well. We think that Ryman is a game changer in care for both our residents and for our staff. It was a nursing-led project and delivered ahead of schedule for more than 3,000 devices installed in residence rooms throughout the country, and Melbourne will obviously be next. It frees up paperwork and means that our staff can actually spend more time caring for residents, and the team are excited about the potential for future innovations which we can use from what we've installed and what we've learnt. For those of us that read the business pages and read about technology projects, what do you normally read? Yeah, we've got cost overrun there, failure, not delivered on time, any more starters. People actually hate the system. So this project has been delivered on time. People love it, and it's working. And we've been able to do it across 3,000 rooms, and by training over 3,000 caregivers and registered nurses. And that is a remarkable achievement to do that in 12 months across 31 villages. So it's just worthy of noting. One thing to talk about something, another thing to actually get it done. It's one of the biggest investments we've ever made, and it's a real testament to the whole skills of the team. We've also put a lot of focus on building our teams as well as our management capabilities. We've put significant extra resources into every stage of our development, design, consenting, and our community relation processes and teams. Because it's at that front end, as we gear up in Melbourne, that we need to get our resource in the earliest so that we can start the throughput. You'll be aware we have an aspiration to have 5 villages open in Victoria by the end of 2020. As you know, our first village has been open for some time now, and there's a reasonable gap between the first and the second. But we're delighted to say that our first residents will move into our second village very, very soon, called Nellie Melba at Brandon Park. And that's a picture of our fabulous Nellie Melba construction team, with Travis at the front there, who's the project manager, and just to his left is Marty Osborne, who is our Victorian construction manager. And Marty's like the perfect person to be helping us in Australia. He built 2 villages for us in New Zealand. He's done 20 years construction in Australia, so he knows both the local environment and he knows Ryman. He's very dedicated to what we do. We have development approval for our 3rd village at Coburg, and we hope to get construction underway by the end of this year. There's a picture of Coburg there. We actually haven't built it. It actually does look like we have, doesn't it, in that picture? With the car there. Very clever, these development guys with their pictures. But it looks pretty cool, actually. Also reveal today some great news. We've just received development approval for our 4th village at Burwood East in Melbourne. Although we've got the development approval, there is still building consent to complete for the whole site, and this may take some months. So one of the differences in Melbourne is that you have to get all of your building consents for the whole site at once. Whereas in New Zealand, you could get building consent, say, for those first stage of apartments there at the front and then get on with it. So that just takes a little bit more time. We're also working on getting development approval for what is likely to be our 5th village in Victoria at Geelong, and we'd hope to be underway in the next 6 months or so. Just down the road in Hamilton, in addition to that, we have another 3 sites to develop, 2 on the Mornington Peninsula, 1 at Mount Eliza and another at Mount Martha, and the 3rd is at Aberfeldy in Melbourne, which we announced in May. We're working on designs for all 3 now. So in total we have 7 new villages to build in Victoria, and the development team is also searching for more sites, and in fact we discussed a few with Andrew yesterday at the board meeting, as well as new sites in New Zealand as well, of course. We've been just as busy in New Zealand. We added to the land bank with new sites at Karori in Wellington and also at Havelock North. In Auckland, our Logan Campbell village near One Tree Hill is selling fast. It's a stunning village with, you can just see there, can't you? Fantastic views around Auckland. And we actually had a recent, an open day recently on a Sunday in about mid-June. It was about a week before our Ryman conference. And I remember seeing the sales advisors a few days later at the conference. We had over 700 people on that Sunday, on that one day. And one of the people had just come from a competitor retirement village open day just a couple of k's down the road. They had 3 people there. So that's always good to hear. We're not competitive at all. Our first residents arrived in March and the care centre is now open, and work is well underway in the final stage at the southern end of the site. As you can see, our Linfield village is taking shape quickly, and our first stage is on track to open in November. Our Devonport village is also well underway. The first 2 buildings are taking shape, and the first residents should arrive in their new apartments by the end of the financial year. Just down the road in Hamilton, we have earthworks underway at our new village at River Road. Local iwi recently held a karakia with us at the site ahead of major earthworks. However, if you drive past that site today, you won't see much activity. And that's because we have recently discovered some pre-European remains on site, and we're now working through the required archaeological protocols with Heritage New Zealand and also with local iwi, and it's likely to take a couple of months to put those protocols in place and recommence significant earthworks. However, because this is happening during the winter, it's not the same as having that sort of delay during the summer months, which are much busy from a build point of view. Next off the rank, are likely to be our Lincoln Road and our Hobsonville villages in Auckland. Lincoln Road, we've actually just submitted for resource consent with Auckland Council, and Hobsonville, we're busy designing that up to put that through the planning process as well. So as you can see, the team has got a lot going on actually in terms of new build and sales, and we've got a great runway ahead. We've invested heavily in our staff and in our leadership development during the year, and also in the care of our residents. And we're looking forward to another very productive year ahead. And you know, when I joined Ryman, and the reason I stay, is that it's a real privilege actually to, when you go to villages and you see the care that we provide for people and the opportunities that we provide for people who work with us. It means that you're part of a company that both does good things for people, and also is successful. And it's actually quite rare to be at a company where you can enjoy those 2 things. And I sort of think about the fact that we already positively influence the lives of thousands of people around the country, people that work with us and our residents and people who serve us in other ways. And if I think about the next 5 or 10 years and the opportunities for us to positively influence thousands of more lives as we complete our development programs and continue with our expansion, I think we've got a very exciting future ahead. So thank you.